Hello, I'm Christopher Kenworthy and I'm going to show you how to apply digital makeup to this shot here. So sometimes when you shoot you don't get the exact look you want. You need to correct the skin tones or remove blemishes just to perfect things. So start by dragging Face Raw to the Create New Composition button, and I'm just going to set this to fit up to 100%. Now what we can do is key out the skin and blur it, but first of all I'm going to put a mask around one of the layers so that we're not having to key the whole layer. It just keeps things a bit simpler. So I'm going to duplicate this layer and name the top one Skin, and with that selected, select the pen tool and just draw a very loose mask around the skin that we want to use. Now I've used this scarf very handily to as a cutoff point. That could be the person's neckline or whatever else, but pick something that works for your shot. You can see what you've done by clicking the eye here on the lower layer, so that's selected. Now I'm going to go over here, type Luma, find the Luma key, filter, and drop that on. Now depending on the skin type and how it's lit will depend on whether you key out darker, brighter, similar or dissimilar, and the best way is just to experiment. I know that for this particular shot, and generally for shots that look like this, key out similar is the best way. And I'm going to adjust the tolerance like this, and what you're trying to do is make everything except the skin disappear. You can combine threshold and tolerance to get the look you're after. Now generally the best way to do this is to get it so that it's almost right, and then use edge thinning just to block out those extra bits. So we don't want the middle of the lips, we definitely don't want the eyes because we want to keep the footage sharp, and you can feather the edge as well, which just softens it all up. Maybe about 25 would be right. Actually, maybe a little less. I'm just going to adjust the... Actually, fine for this one. It might work best with the threshold at 0 and the tolerance around 100. Now you can see that's leaving just the skin. Most of the scarf has disappeared now. Could just pull that in if I wasn't happy with it. The other thing you can do, of course, hit F and feather the mask itself, which would draw that edge in a little. Let's have a look if we want to do that. So as you can see, it's very much doing it by feel until you're left with most of the skin and not much else. You could be more precise than this if you want. Like you can see these dark areas have been masked out. You might want to keep those. If we just turn it off, we can have a look and say, do we want to keep those areas? Or those areas that we particularly need to correct? Well, they actually look pretty smooth, so I'm not going to worry too much. If I was worrying, then I could pull that back out like that. The main thing is, so long as the eyes are sharp, that's where people focus. So I'm actually going to just knock that up back to where it was. Okay, so that's our skin. Now we want to blur it. There are lots of different blurs you can use, but I find the Gaussian blur tends to do a pretty good job. So apply the Gaussian blur. Now you can set this to simply horizontal or vertical, and you'll get different effects. I find horizontal and vertical works best, although we do have to reduce the opacity of this layer. So I'm going to put this up to about 25. Pretty blurry. Now we need to see how it looks on top of the other layer, so I'm going to make Face Raw visible. So there they are, just combined, and obviously that's way too blurry and doesn't look like real skin. So we want to change the blending mode to darker color. That's working now. You can see the difference between that and when I turn it off. That's the skin beforehand. It's a little more blemishy. There's more shadow and light and contrast. That smooths everything out when we switch it back on.
However, I am just going to hit T on this layer and just reduce the opacity down to about 75. That's a little better there. And finally, just hit M, hit the keyframe clock for the mask path, and then drag through the footage, see if we need to move that mask at all. We do, not much. Go to the end, maybe a little more, and there you go. You've got your digital makeup, that skin is smoothed out, and you're ready to export.